What do we have here? We have the micarta melee.
MICARTA
Trying to figure out
melee.
what is the good micarta and what is the bad micarta. What even is micarta? That's another good question, right? Micarta is this stuff. It's the handle material. It's basically, it's either fabric or paper or some kind of flexible sheeting that is pressed under heat and under pressure, and they put some resin in it, some kind of epoxy type stuff, phenolic, melamine, glue basically. It's glue between layers of paper or fabric. You can see the little layers there. See that little, every little V-shaped thing? That's the next layer, the next layer, the next layer. And it makes great handle material for one thing. The right kind of it actually gets kind of more grippy when it gets wet. So this is a good example of that. I think it's a denim micarta, but I'm not sure. And it's on a Rat 7, Ontario knife, Rat 7. I think the first micarta knife handles were on fixed blades, and they were only on fixed blades for a while. I think it was later that they started doing them on pocket knives, and there's kind of a reason for that. It's not quite as strong as G10. It's a little more flexible than G10. It's a little harder to machine and mill and make perfect than G10 because it's a little sloppy on the edges. I mean, it's fabric with glue. So it's a little bit more like wood, you know? That's kind of, it reminds me of well-made micarta reminds me of wood, kind of, you know. It has grain, and the grain matters. I think, you know, in G10 maybe it matters a little bit, but not as much. Well, what do we have here? We have some various micarta pocket knives, and they're basically from worst to best, in my opinion, which is the only one that matters, really, in this. This is a Tucson, and I call it the ugly old lettuce micarta because it reminds me of like old lettuce that sat around. I don't know exactly what their process is. It's not great. It's just ugly. It looks like there's just like a few strings and then a bunch of like dark green glue between the strings. I mean, maybe you like that. I don't know. I don't love it. But it actually has a pretty good texture. It kind of looks like they poured it into a mold. Can you see the little lines across it? It looks like it was poured into a mold, and then this fabric was kind of pressed down into the mold, and, you know, more layers of the fabric, I guess. Can't really get a good, okay, how's the edge look? Yeah, you can't really see any layers. It's almost like this one piece of fabric was just laid over somehow, or, you know, down in the mold. I don't know. I don't know how they do it, but this is not attractive. It feels okay. It's not quite as grippy as good micarta, but it feels okay. It's not bad. I think it's because of those little micro grooves on it from maybe being in a mold. I don't know. Here's some more Tucson micarta that's not the best. You can kind of see the layers in that one a little better. This one is very waxy feeling, kind of oily feeling. Not the best. It's not grippy like micarta should be. Great knife though. The TS 392. Great knife. A little bit ugly on the micarta, but really nice otherwise. This one's a little better. Another Tucson. You might notice a little pattern here. Tucson kind of makes ratty looking micarta. This one's a little better, but still kind of ratty. This was brown before I sanded it a bit and dyed it purple. So that's what you get if you really kind of fix up the micarta a little bit. It looks better, but still not great. But this is a great knife though. TS 336. Been polished and anodized and etc. But still good. And then this one is one of their better micartas, even though it's still kind of that ugly, ratty stuff. And I don't know if this was pressed into a mold and made into this frag shape, or if they actually cut the frag shape after they made the micarta. Yeah, I don't know. It looks like it was probably machined. That's my guess. And pretty well, fairly well done. So, yeah, for ugly micarta, it's not bad. This is a nice one too. What is, oh, this is a 6-leaf, which is like a variant of Tucson. SL14. The rattlesnake design. And you saw this one. This is like a cotton-based fabric that's in the micarta. Something interesting about micarta, it's actually a kind of like a patented kind of a, would you call it, you know, a trademarked name. So kind of like calling a soda Coke. So if you call micarta, you know, if you call this micarta, it's kind of like calling Pepsi Coke, because this isn't really micarta. This isn't the US made, Norplex company made micarta that's actually really micarta. You know, they started making it back like in the early 1900s. Not sure what for. I think just for making things that needed to be strong and heat resistant. You know, it's kind of like Formica a little bit. Here's a Sencut, which is some pretty good micarta. Pretty grippy, kind of soft feeling. Yeah, it's not bad. I ground this one a little bit to make these angles a little more, you know, what's the right word? Angled. These angles need to be more angled because they were too straight before. Kind of like, well, I think I even did the back. Yeah, I'm not sure. I did some grinding on it, and I had to re-dye it because it actually kind of lost some of its green. Great knife though. Sencut, what's it called? A Crowley. Was it in D2? Yeah, it doesn't matter. We're not talking about steel right now. We're talking about micarta. What's next here? Now we're into some really, really nice ones. What do we have here? We have the Nest Street from Concept. Look at that micarta. This one feels like almost like a hardwood. I think you can grind this stuff and sand on it and it just stays the same. It's funny, it doesn't look probably on camera all that much different than this stuff, but it really is. It's hard to explain why. It doesn't feel waxy, where this one kind of does. This one feels slippery. This one doesn't feel slippery at all. It feels grippy. And it just feels just really nicely made. You can see the different layers there. I think this one's probably denim too, but I'm not sure. What's next? Another Concept. This one's cool because you can kind of see the little bits of fabric down in there in these cuts. And it feels really, really good too. I've actually used this one while it was wet, out camping. And it definitely was very grippy. This one too. I used that one while wet. Even more grippy. This one feels like it's stuck to your hand, basically. Weird. It's a weird property of this stuff. Now this one, this is some Kaiser micarta. Very good, very nice. Just feels almost like a really hard plastic, but just real, real grippy. It's a sheepdog that's been kind of chopped up a little bit. Anyway, so that's your micarta. That's what micarta is. It's some fabric glued together to make a pretty nice and pretty machinable handle material for knives. And up until, you know, I don't know, the past 10 years or something, it was mostly only on big fixed blades, you know, camping type knives, stuff like that. Heavy duty knives. Then they kind of figured out that they could make linen micarta. Well, I guess, I'm sure there was already linen micarta, but linen micarta worked well for knife handles and could work as pocket knife handles even when they needed to do fairly precise machinings on them. And whatever kind of weird micarta this is, obviously works too. What is this? Tucson? I forget which Tucson that is. So anyway, stay tuned for a fascinating look at the making of micarta, and have a nice day.
The loom Lumite division of the Chicopee Manufacturing Corporation of Georgia is the company that finally transforms the saran into
MICARTA
products that will be used by the consumers. First, some of the fiber is rewound onto bobbins that will shuttle back and forth in the weaving to make the cross strands. Other spools are put on a creel to be rewound onto much larger rolls. They'll feed the fibers that run longitudinally. Chicopee has had long experience as a manufacturer of cotton cloth, so the changeover to weaving plastic fabric
MICARTA
was accomplished with a minimum of confusion. About once every 2 days, the roll of
MICARTA
saran thread for the warp must be renewed, and a mechanical tire joins every strand in only a few minutes. It's here, for example, that a company like Lumite is able to take advantage of knowledge gained in generations of practice in allied fields. Once everything is ready, the loom goes into action.
making MICARTA.
And the end product, not cloth as you think of it in this case, although elsewhere in the plant the plastic is woven into fabrics for a variety of uses. This is insect screen cloth
MICARTA.
with some surprising advantages over the usual screening materials. Completely rust and corrosion resistant,
The end.